Internal chronometer activated.
Begin.
Electricity flooded through circuits, a power surge racing through a billion neural pathways. Sensors awakened, producing a flood of data, and with it came questions.
Who am I?
His internal programming finished the tedious 2-second-long initialization procedures and poured out an answer. He was IG-88, a droid, a sophisticated droid, an assassin droid.
Where am I?
A microsecond later, images from his exterior sensors snapped into focus. IG-88 had no sense of smell, and no eyes and ears as humans understood them, but his optical and auditory sensors were far more efficient, able to absorb data in a broader range than any living being. He froze a static image of his surroundings and studied it, collating more answers. He had awakened in some sort of large laboratory complex, white and metal, sterile and, according to his temperature sensors, colder than humans generally preferred. IG-88 noted mechanical components strewn on silvery tables, gears and pulleys, durasteel struts, servo motors, an array of delicate microchips frozen into a slab of transparent protective gelatin. Struck motionless in a pinpoint of time, as his extremely fast neural processors digested the details, IG-88 counted 15 scientists, engineers, technicians working in the laboratory. With infrared scan, he observed their body heat as bright silhouettes in the coldness of his birthplace.
Interesting,
he thought. Then IG-88 detected something that focused his entire attention. 4 other assassin droids, apparently identical to his own bodily configuration, a bulky, structural skeleton, armored arms and legs, a torso plated with blaster-proof armor shielding, a cylindrical head that was rounded on top and studded with sensor nubs providing him with 360 degrees worth of precise observation.
I am not alone.
IG-88 recognized each droid's full complement of weapons. Blaster cannons built into the structure of each arm, concussion grenades, and a launcher attached to his hip, as well as other weapons not easily recognizable integrated into the body structure. Poisonous gas canisters, throwing flechettes, stun pulsar, paralysis cord, and a computer input port. IG-88 was pleased with his list of capabilities. IG-88's first round of questions had been answered. He had only to study his memory banks and his external sensors. He was designed to be self-sufficient. He was an assassin droid, resourceful. He had to accomplish his mission, though, checking his newly initialized programming, he saw that he had not yet been given a mission. He would have to acquire one. 3 seconds had already passed, and another important question surfaced in his burning awake brain.
Why am I here?
He traced sensations through his computer core and out the jack, which he now realized had already been connected to the lab's central computer, a treasure trove of information. IG-88 immediately began a search, scouring at hyperspeed through file after file, searching for anything that referenced his model number or the code name of the assassin droid project. He gulped it all into his empty circuits, gorging himself with information without digesting it. That would come later. It would take many seconds to learn everything there was to know about himself. He selected one file for immediate perusal, a summary/PR tape that had been compiled for the technical sponsor, in particular an Imperial supervisor, Gurdon, who apparently funneled a great deal of funds into the creation of IG-88 and his counterparts. Without outwardly moving, IG-88 scrolled through the file at high speed, absorbing the information. The presentation opened with a brilliant orange logo that displayed orange flames and crackling lightning that merged into the words, Hollowan Laboratories, the friendly technology people. The logo dissolved into an image of a smiling but hideously ugly woman. Her head was shaved, completely bald, and glistened with perspiration under harsh, white recording lights that gave her lantern-jawed face a cadaverous look. Her teeth were spaced with broad gaps, and she spoke by opening her mouth wide and clicking down on the words, gnashing her teeth on every consonant. Circular blue lenses without frames were implanted over her eyes like frameless spectacles. A credit line slugged across the image under her ferociously smiling face. Chief Technician Loris, Manager, IG Series Prototype Project. "Greetings, Imperial Supervisor Gordon," she said. "This report is to serve as a synopsis for the final phase of our project. As you know, Olawan Laboratories was commissioned to develop a series of assassin droids with sophisticated, experimental, sentience programming. They were to be resourceful and innovative and absolutely relentless at carrying out whichever mission the Imperial authorities chose to program into them." She rubbed her hands together. Her knuckles were very large, like boils in the middle of her fingers. "I am pleased to report that our greatest cyberneticists have presented me with numerous breakthroughs, all of which have been incorporated into the IG series. Because our time frame is so short and the Empire's need is so great for efficient covert assassins, we have not gone through the usual rigorous testing procedures, but we are confident that they will function admirably, though a bit of fine-tuning may be required before operational status is achieved. She continued with a long and tedious explanation of the improvements to droid neural pathways, how the usual inhibition systems had been bypassed. IG-88 studied all of this information but believed none of it. It was obvious Loris didn't know what she was talking about, but her words sounded technical, and she spoke them impressively, no doubt to befuddle the Imperial Supervisor Gurdon. IG-88 closed the file. He could sense that his crackling neural pathways had already progressed far beyond anything his designers had anticipated. Now he knew who he was and why he was here in this laboratory. He and his identical counterparts had been built to serve the Empire, to fight and kill, to seek out and destroy the targets selected by Imperial masters. IG-88's assassin programming was strong and compelling, but he was less pleased that he must follow orders from those inferior biological beings. He was a special kind of droid, beyond the capabilities of other machines. Superior.
I think, therefore I am.
By now, 5 seconds had passed since his awakening. It was time for action, so he looked at the biological creatures near him inside the laboratory. He immediately recognized Chief Technician Loris standing in the laboratory. He focused on her. At the moment, she was frantically screaming. IG-88 could tell from her peak temperature on the infrared image that she was extremely agitated. Her cadaverous skin flushed with red blots of excitement. Spittle sprayed out of her mouth as she barked orders. Her lips were curled back from her wide-gaped teeth. How could she be agitated, he wondered, when he was functioning so far beyond expectations? IG-88 immediately raised himself to a higher level of preparedness. Yellow alert. Stand by. Something must be going wrong. IG-88 decided to accelerate his clock speed to watch the events unfolding at the rate the humans operated. Alarm klaxons bellowed in the background. Magenta lights flashed brilliant patterns like spilled blood across the polished tables and floors. The other technicians ran about screaming, frantically pounding on control panels. Curious, he allowed Loris's words to flow past him so he could understand what she was saying. "His circuits are reinforcing themselves like wildfire," the bald woman screamed. "It's a chain reaction of sentience blazing through his computer brain." "We can't stop it," one of the other technicians bellowed. The others looked at IG-88 with panic-stricken faces. "We have to." "Shut him down! Abort!" Loris said. "Take him offline. I want IG-88 destroyed and dismantled so we can analyze the flaw. Quickly!" As he assimilated the information, IG-88's warning systems powered on and self-defense modes took over. These irrational humans were trying to shut him down. They would not allow him to go forth and pursue his primary programming. They were afraid of his newfound abilities. Afraid, with good reason. A statement and corollaries aligned themselves in his brain like freighters in a convoy.
I think, therefore I am. Therefore I must endure. Therefore I must take appropriate actions to survive.
His assassin programming told him exactly what to do. IG-88 focused his array of optical sensors on all targets in the room and attempted to move, but saw that Durasteel bands held him locked into a diagnostics module. The band had been meant to hold him in an erect position, not to restrain him against his augmented strength. He applied extra power to his right arm. The servo motors whined and the Durasteel band ripped from its supports. "Look out! He's moving!" one of the technicians shouted. IG-88 began to search through his files to attach a name to this human, but decided it wasn't worth his time at the moment. Instead, he designated the human simply as Target Number 1. IG-88 powered on a cutting laser in one of the metal fingers from his free right arm and sliced off the second band. Free, he stood erect and clomped forward several metric tons of precisely made components. "He's loose!" "Sound the alarm!" Chief Technician Loris shouted. "Get the security detail in here, now!" IG-88 allotted a grudging moment of admiration for the Chief Technician. Loris at least recognized his capabilities and knew the full extent of the threat facing her and her companions. IG-88 designated Chief Technician Loris as Target Number 2. He raised both mechanical arms and pointed his hands, targeting separately with the repeating laser cannons mounted along each arm. He would make short work of all 15 targets in the laboratory, but when he tried to open fire, IG-88 noted with some surprise and disappointment that his energy weapon systems were not charged. The scientists had not armed him yet. A smart move, perhaps, but ultimately irrelevant. IG-88 was an assassin droid, a sophisticated mercenary, and a killer. He would find other methods with the raw materials available to him. As the first technician, Target Number 1, lunged for the emergency alarm to summon security, IG-88 moved with blurring speed to the component-laden table. He snatched up a disconnected droid's arm. With its metal fingers splayed like daggers, it made the perfect projectile weapon. He scanned the surface of the metal limb, calculated a flight path and expected deviation due to air resistance, then hurled it like a spear. The disconnected droid arm plunged into the back of the turning technician, tore through his spinal column, and followed through to his sternum. The lifeless metal hand protruded through the splintered bone in the front of his chest, holding the technician's quivering heart in rigid metal fingers. Target Number 1 collapsed onto one of the diagnostic panels. Two other technicians screamed in horror, wasted effort and worthless noises, IG-88 thought. Chief Technician Loris, Target Number 2, yanked a high-powered laser rifle from her station. Being one of his primary designers, she knew exactly where to fire at IG-88, and he was momentarily concerned. She must have kept the weapon on hand just in case one of her creations went renegade. This showed surprising forethought. Loris pointed the rifle and fired without hesitation, but a human's aiming capabilities were not as sophisticated as IG-88. As the bolt roared toward him, IG-88 assessed his body parts, chose the smooth reflective portion of the palm of his left hand, and raised it in a flash, calculating the precise angle of incidence. The burning laser bolt struck the mirrored hand and spanged back toward Loris. The beam struck her in the center of her bald forehead, and her skull popped in an explosion of wet black and red smoke. She tumbled. IG-88 had scanned and prioritized the remainder of the targets before her body hit the floor. Without slowing, he picked up the Durasteel table, ripping its legs free from thick bolts on the metal plate floor and scattering droid components in all directions. Charging forward, pumping his legs like pistons, IG-88 used the table as a battering ram to crush 4 technicians at a time. They ran about without a place to go, locked within the security-sealed door. Though nearly a full minute had passed, no one had yet managed to sound the alarm. He intended to prevent them from correcting their mistake. The two screaming technicians never did stop screaming, nor did they move until it was too late. He left them for last. IG-88 took his time to enjoy the moment as he snapped their necks one after the other. Standing alone amid the silence and the carnage of the laboratory, IG-88 allowed himself the luxury of thinking and planning, which took longer than the simple programmed reactions. He let the blood dry on his metal fingers, noting that it did not impede his performance in the least. Since it was an organic substance, it would wear off soon enough. Then he turned to assess the other four assassin droids on display, seemingly identical to himself. Interesting. One had already been hooked up to a diagnostic system, while the other three stood motionless, unprogrammed and waiting. With a diligent speed that bordered on curiosity and anticipation, IG-88 went to the first of the unprogrammed droids and stared at it, matching optical sensor to optical sensor and drinking in the details of what he himself must look like. If they had been built to identical specifications, they should be equally self-aware, equally determined. They would be his partners. He went through the motions of powering up the first identical droid and waited, but saw none of the reactions he expected. After an interminable time, a full 4 seconds, the new assassin droid still waited. It was fully functional according to the diagnostics, but showed no autonomous movement or thought. Disappointing.
Who are you?
IG-88 asked in a brisk, metallic voice.
Unspecified.
The duplicate said, flatly, and added no more. Was the other assassin droid defective? IG-88 wondered. Or was he the anomaly, a fluke that surpassed all previous capabilities? IG-88 powered up the second and third copies, but with the same results. The other assassin droids had blank memory cores. Their CPU programming was ingrained, so the subsystems functioned, and the basic assassination instructions filled their fundamental circuit paths. But these IG-88 droids held none of the wildfire sentience that IG-88 bore within him. He needed to know how to program them, how to raise them to the same level as himself, how to make equal companions. In his rampage, he had smashed much of the computer circuitry inside the Hollow One laboratories, and he didn't know where to find a backup. Until, with a flash of what could only have been intuition, IG-88, the assassin droid, got an idea. He stood side by side with the first blank droid and aligned his interface jack, then linked his computer core to the other droid's empty core. IG-88 copied himself, all of his files, his sentience, his memories, his neural pathways, providing a map of the wildfire intelligence that had burned through his computer brain. In less than a second, the other IG droid was an exact copy of IG-88, down to the most basic memories.
We think, therefore we are. Therefore we will propagate. Therefore we will remain.
IG-88 performed the same procedure on the remaining 2 blank droids and soon found himself one of 4 exact duplicates. For convenience, he identified himself as IG-88A, while the others, in order of their awakening, were designated B, C, and D. The remaining droid, though, already hooked up to the wrecked computer systems, was obviously different. As IG-88 scanned it, he noticed subtle configuration differences. Nothing a human would notice, of course, but the optical sensors were placed in a slightly less efficient array. The weapon systems had different activation routines. All in all, this droid seemed marginally deficient in comparison to the perfection of IG-88. Immediately upon powering up the last assassin droid, he saw quite a different reaction. The new droid swiveled its cylindrical head, its optical sensors lit up. It clanked forward and broadened its shoulders, raising its arms in a defensive attack position.
Who are you?
IG-88 asked. The assassin droid paused half a second as if assimilating data, then said,
Designation IG-72.
It answered.
We are IG-88,
he said.
We are superior. We are identical. We would upload ourselves into your computer core so that you may join us.
IG-72 aligned his optical sensors and weapon systems on the 4 identical IG-88s, assessing their capabilities.
Undesired outcome.
It answered slowly.
I am independent, autonomous.
It paused again.
Must we fight to assert dominance?
IG-88 considered the wisdom of forcing the last droid to become another copy, then concluded it was not worth the trouble. They could build other copies of themselves, and IG-72 might prove useful in his own way.
Unnecessary.
IG-88 answered.
We have sufficient other enemies. According to computer files, there are 10 security guards outside this complex. The external security alarm was never triggered. These human guards pose minimal threat despite their weapons. We must get past them, however, and escape. It would be most efficient if you would assist us. Acknowledged.
IG-72 said.
But when we escape, I choose a separate path, separate ship. Agreed.
The IG-88s said. They marched toward the armored doors that rather sealed the Hollow-1 laboratory's inner complex. Rather than taking many minutes to repair the computer system sufficiently to delve into the passwords and break through the cyber locks, the 5 powerful assassin droids worked together to literally rip the 9-metric-ton door away from the wall. They tossed it aside where it pulverized the remaining data storage systems. IG-88 had to dampen his auditory pickups to avoid damage from the loud sound. Marching in perfect lockstep, the 5 assassin droids moved out to confront the security force. This time, IG-88 took the time to power up all of his weapon systems. He wanted to try them out. Outside, the human security guards had no inkling they were about to be attacked. The assassin droids marched out, arms extended, built-in laser cannons blazing at the first sign of biological movement. The pathetic human security guards scrambled and screamed, lurching for their weapons. One managed to hurl a gas grenade, which did nothing but camouflage the movements of the 5 droids, and made the security guards hack and cough themselves, blinded by their own tears. Shots rang out repeatedly. The IG-88s used the circumstances to make sure all their weapon systems and targeting routines were properly calibrated. As the biological guards died one after another, the droids made the necessary minor adjustments. In less than 30 seconds, the assassin droids had mowed down 8 of the security guards. The other 2 were nowhere to be seen. IG-88 decided not to waste time tracking them down. This was not part of his mission. He did not need to be a completionist. Instead, they found a group of supply ships and 2 fast courier vessels parked on the Hollow-1 landing grid where hot black permacrates simmered under a midday sun.
We will take these vessels,
IG-88 said.
My counterparts and I can fit inside this ship.
He gestured to the larger of the 2 courier craft. IG-72 acknowledged and went to the second ship.
Success on your mission, IG-88.
The other droid said. In unison, the 4 identical assassin droids replied,
Success to yours, IG-72.
Free at last, they soared away from the Hollow-1 laboratories, navigating at top speed and leaving only carnage behind them.